Take me where the promises are real. Are real. The promises are real.
My name is Alex, and I'm an alcoholic. Welcome to the Monday 8 p.m. Blue Chip Speakers meeting here at the NABA Club, where a member of Alcoholics Anonymous with 1 year or more of sobriety tells his or her story. This reading is based on a passage from page 29 of the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. Each individual in our personal stories describes in their own language and from their own point of view the way they establish their relationship with God. These give a fair cross-section of our membership and clear-cut idea of what has happened in their lives. We hope no one will consider these self-revealing accounts in bad taste. Our hope is that many alcoholic men and women in our room tonight and listening later on AABlueChipSpeakers.org will hear our speaker, and we believe that it is only by fully disclosing ourselves and our problems that any of us shall be persuaded to say, yes, I am one of them too. I must have this thing. And our speaker tonight comes to us from the Alpharetta Group. He is also spends a lot of time in meetings in Gainesville, and I'm very excited to hear about his last couple of decades familiar with the rooms. And with that, we have Craig.
My name's Craig, and I am an alcoholic. Glad to be here tonight, and thank you for everybody that read tonight, and especially to Mary. First meeting, welcome to Alcoholics Anonymous. I can remember my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. It was 24 years ago up in Terre Haute, Indiana, and I was scared to hell y'all were going to ask me to read something when I came into that meeting. I was fearful of reading, so being here for your first time and reading, that's a big deal. So, just getting over that fear is a huge deal. So first time, my name is Craig, and I am an alcoholic, and I'm very grateful to be here tonight, to be sober tonight. I get to be, to be part of this program, and it's a miracle, I have my sobriety date September 20th, 2021. I have a sponsor. His name's Troy from the Alpharetta Group, Troy A. And I also sponsor some other gentlemen, and my kids know where I'm at tonight, and they know I'm sober tonight, and that's a beautiful thing, And so what I'm supposed to do is tell a little bit about what I used to be like, what happened to me, and what I'm like today, and 20 years ago, it's hard to believe that 24 years ago I was introduced to Alcoholics Anonymous, but to go back a little bit further, I knew when I was a kid, I knew I was different. You hear that a lot in Alcoholics Anonymous. You hear that, we feel different, and I felt different. I knew when I went to first grade that, I didn't fit in, and the bad part was I wanted to fit in, right? I wanted to be part of, and always felt like that I wasn't. And, but I wanted to, everything I did, I obsessed about it. I can remember being a kid and playing sports, and hell, I wanted to be the number one person, I wanted to win. I didn't want to lose, and I did whatever it took to win. And, in school, I wanted to have good grades. My parents, especially my dad, raised me in a way that, that basically said, if you want to have things in life, if you want a good job, if you want to make good money, you got to work harder than everybody else. And so I knew that in school I had to make good grades if I wanted to go to college. And, so I excelled in that. But, I always wanted to be part of that in group, and I never was part of that in group. And I was shy and scared and just had a lot of fear, fearful of things. A lot of it was, as it talks about in this big book, it was imagined. And I was raised in a way that, we didn't talk about those kinds of things. And, I don't blame my parents for any of that. It's just the way it was. They were doing the best they could, and that's probably how they were raised too. And, but very, very fearful as a kid. And, but I had this desire to win and number one and to be better. So I pursued that in sports, and I always practiced harder than everybody else and stayed longer than everybody else. And after I accomplished something, I didn't want to do it anymore, right? So I'd get to a point, and then I'd get what I wanted, then I'd stop. But I can remember, and when I was in high school, I had this guy that moved down the street from me. We were both in ninth grade, and he was from the country of Panama. And so I started hanging out with him, and he liked to drink and smoke. And I was over at his house one evening, and he pulled out some Panamanian rum from Panama. And I can remember, and you hear this a lot in Alcoholics Anonymous too. I can remember, I've had a couple of sips of beer before that, but I can remember I got drunk that night, and he had a couple of drinks and he didn't get drunk. But I can remember when I put that alcohol in my mouth and I felt that feeling, that sense of ease and peace that we get when we put it in us, I felt a part of. I felt like I was, I could finally relax and breathe and it's just what I wanted, right? I could talk, I could be the person I wanted to be, and I felt at peace, and I got drunk that night, and I can remember from that day forward, I hid it from my parents. I had to go home the next day and I was hungover, but I hid it from them. And the other part was I wanted to do it again. I wanted to get drunk again, and I did. But during high school we drank a little bit, drank on the weekends, but still studied a lot during the week because I wanted to have good grades and to go to college. But that's what I did. I didn't get in any trouble during that time period, but when I did drink, I drank to get drunk, and that was the difference. That's what we do. We can't, we got an allergy, and I didn't understand this until this book right here, the most important book around for us drunks, right? And it says in here, on page 112, it says we got to read this book. In the doctor's opinion, it says we got to read this book, and there's it talks about in the doctor's opinion, that we got an allergy, right? And what is an allergy is when I put that alcohol in my body, I have an abnormal reaction, right? Others can put it in their body and they don't have this abnormal reaction, but I put it in my body and I can't just have one or two. I want to just have one or two, but I can't, right? And after I have one or two, I want more. And, that craving is, the physical craving is, I can't stop, and then after I say I'm not going to do it anymore because I know I got a problem, guess what? I get drunk again, right? And that's the problem with this disease, that it does us like that. But, the cool part is there's a solution to it. So I graduated from high school, and I knew I wanted to go to college, and I went to the University of Georgia, and I knew I wanted to be a certified public accountant because I was dating this girl, and her dad was a certified public accountant, and I knew I was good in math, and by God, that's what I was going to do. So I graduated in less than 4 years. I passed the CPA exam on my first try, and I was ready, and I was working, and the company I worked for, you work hard when you know the people that clean the building, right? I was first one there and the last one to leave, but at age 25 I was in a company as a paper mill and making good money and doing so well they decided that they were going to move me to Indiana, right? It's a great opportunity for me, but I got moved up to Indiana, and boy, that's where I really started drinking. I got up there and I didn't know anybody, right? But I like to drink, and I started hanging out with people that like to drink, and I started drinking a lot, and I started drinking during the day, during the week, and it started to interfere with my job, and what happened to me was I got a DUI in Georgia when I was 25 years old, and it wasn't too big of a deal back in 1995, but I got that DUI and I kind of got that behind me and had to do a couple of classes, but no big deal. And I just wrote it up as I just happened to be the one that got caught that night, but I got up there to Indiana and guess what happened? I got back-to-back DUIs in Indiana, and got one in Illinois, and they sentenced me to intensive outpatient and program, and that's where I was introduced to Alcoholics Anonymous. But I used to say I gave my job away. I lost my job, but what happened was I gave it away, right? I gave that job away that was so great, and they paid such good money, and but that's what happened to me. And it was the year 2000, and I started going to AA up there. And of course, I was 30 years old, and my dad was like, you know what, son, you need to come back to Georgia. I can help you here, and I can fix this. We can fix this. And he didn't know anything about Alcoholics Anonymous, but thank goodness I had a good sponsor in in Indiana. And he said, you know what, man, if you can stay up here for a few months and get some sobriety under your belt and start working the steps, you got a pretty good chance. And that's what I did. I stayed up there, and I started working through the steps, and got some sobriety under my belt, and I came back to Georgia. And I got a sponsor here in Georgia. This was 2001. And, I did what we're supposed to do in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. I chaired meetings. I was of service. I read the book. I helped other people. And things got so good that guess what happened? I didn't need you guys anymore, right? And I got some sobriety, years of sobriety under my belt. And life got good. I got married, got a nice house. I started working for the company I work for today. It's a poultry company up in Gainesville, and life got good, and I decided that I wanted to work more and make more, and that was going to solve everything, and it got so good that I didn't think I needed to come to Alcoholics Anonymous anymore. And guess what? I didn't. I stopped going, and I don't. Comes down to this for me, and I know this from my experience. I'm an alcoholic. If I've got to either treat my illness, I've got to treat it with alcohol, right? I got to treat it with alcohol, I've got to treat it with a program of recovery, right? Or there's another way, and I did it for a number of years. I was a dry drunk, and there's nothing worse than being an alcoholic and not putting alcohol in my body and not treating my disease with a program, and just doing nothing. And it was pure misery, right? It was miserable. And, and I was just counting, number, I don't know, it was a long time I lived that way. I had 14 years of sobriety at one time, and, life got so good that, I decided that maybe, maybe I'm not powerless over alcohol, right? And that's how, maybe I can drink again. Maybe I am different than you guys. Maybe it's just because I was 30 years old and now I'm 45 years old. Maybe I can put a little bit of alcohol in my body, and and it got a little bit crazy. Before that, life started. I thought I got divorced during that time. Before I even picked up the first drink, I got divorced. I thought I needed to be single again. I quit the job that I was working at that I went back to. And I was going to be a consultant, and I did that for a number of years. And, and I started dating, and I went out on some dates, and I was sober the first few months of dating. And then guess what happened? One night, and it talks about it in the book, it says that alcohol is a subtle foe, right? A subtle foe. And, and that's what happened to me that night. I was out that night, and she was having a glass of wine, and I looked over there, and I was like, wow, it looks pretty good tonight, right? And I took that that first drink. And it talks about in the book, or without defense against the first drink. And I took that first drink, and guess what happened? Off to the races again. I hadn't had a drop of alcohol in my body for 14 years, but I put that first drink in me, and within a month, I was drinking like I'd never stopped before, right? And that's how, it is a progressive disease. It is progressive. And, wow, you ought to try to explain to your ex-wife, that knew that I was an alcoholic and never saw me drink again, that I could drink successfully again. As alcoholics, we have a way of, lying very good and being manipulative and just, I had her convinced that I could drink again, and I did for 5 years, you know, and it got worse, and it got worse, and it got worse, and what ended up happening to me is, you know, September 19th, 2021, you know, I had good intentions that night. I had no intention of not stopping drinking that night. I had no intention of that was going to be my last night of drinking. And I went out on a date that night, and I drove my car that night. I normally didn't drive because I already had some DUIs, and I sure as heck didn't want another one, right? So I normally didn't drive, but I drove that night. And it was the first date, and she was late, so guess what I did? I had a few extra drinks, right, waiting on her. And, you know, after she got there, I had some more drinks, and you know, the last thing I remember was you know, we were at a bar and having some drinks, and that's the last thing I remember. But I drove that night, and thank God I didn't hit one of you guys when I was driving down the road, right? Because I could have and not even known it. Thank God I didn't, you know, hurt myself. But driving home in a blackout, I hit a curb and ran off the road, and you know, got arrested, you know, that night. And you know, I know God's hand was in, looking back on it now, I realize it, but like I said, I had no intention of getting sober that night. But God struck me sober that night. He struck me sober that night, and I didn't know it, but I have two daughters that are 12 and 15 now, but my oldest daughter, she had been praying for me, okay? She'd been praying for me the last 3 or 4 months of drinking. She'd been praying that her dad stopped drinking, right? And I had no idea that, you know, she was standing in the gap. You know, she was standing in the gap, and, you know, God was listening to her and, you know, heard her prayers. And, you know, I got arrested that night. I don't remember anything about it other than after I got arrested, and I had to go back and I read that police report. And I know God's hand was in play that night too, because the guy that was trying to help me saw me run off the road and was trying to help me. I was trying to pay him off so he wouldn't call the cops, you know. And me and him got in a little bit of a disagreement. And thank God I didn't pull that pistol out of my car and shoot him, because I could have and not even known it, right? And, you know, thank God for good sponsorship, because I had to go back to this man and make amends for the actions that I did that night of, you know, where he's just trying to help, be a good Samaritan, and I'm trying to fight with him. But I got taken to jail that night, and it talks about it in the book about, you know, I was sitting there in that jail cell, and I thought about, you know what, I think I was going to go on to the bitter end, right? You know, how in the hell did I end up here again, right? And it's just, it came, you know, it hit me, you know, I was thinking about how I was going to lie my way out of this one, right? Pay my way out, lie my way out. And, you know, stayed in jail. It was Sunday night, so I got out of jail Sunday. Oh, that's the other bad thing. You get arrested with, you know, cell phones today. You know, only number I knew was my ex-wife's phone number. You know, I didn't know. I didn't call her, right? But, you know, so I got a bail bondsman to finally get me out of there at noon on a Monday. And guess what? I was supposed to be at work, you know, at 8 o'clock that morning, and I didn't show up to work. And my employer, come to find out, they were driven to my house looking for me, thought I didn't know what had happened. You know, but I finally get out of jail that day, and I go try to go get my car. Of course, I couldn't drive it. I had it at the impound, and it was not drivable. But I can remember, you know, I had to get the taxi cab to take me home and drop me off. And I sat there and I laid on my couch that afternoon. I'm thinking, I called my employer because my phone was blown up from all the messages, and I told him, you know, that I had my brother was sick and I had to take him to the hospital. I made up a lie about what had happened, right? It's what we do, you know, we lie. And I was going to lie my way out of this one, but you know what? I went to bed that night and I said a prayer, something simple like, God, help me. I knew about you guys because I've been around you guys before, and I knew about what Alcoholics Anonymous could do. And I said a simple prayer that, you know, for God to help me, you know. That's the surrender, right? You know, that's conceding to my innermost self that, man, I can't do this anymore, right? And I surrendered that night, and I didn't know what was going to happen. But I woke up the next morning early, and I had a text message from my ex-wife she sent me a text message. Now, she didn't know I just had been arrested the night before, and she said, Craig, I think you've got a drinking problem. I said, oh, really, right? And so, I told her, this is part of getting, it's part of recovery, being honest, open, and willing, and that power came over me, and I became honest with her. And I told her that I just had got arrested, and of course, being a good ex-wife, she said, what the heck are you going to do about that, right? What are you going to do about that? That's what I told her. I'm going to go back to Alcoholics Anonymous, And from that day forward, life has gotten better, right? Every single day from that day forward has gotten better. And so my employer had to come pick me up. The president of the company had to come pick me up out of my neighborhood and give me a ride to work. As soon as I got in his truck, I told him what had happened. Got honest with him. I got to work. I got honest with the owner of the company, my boss, and, honesty. It felt good just to say, what had really happened. And thank God they didn't fire me. Thank God they didn't fire me. They kept me. And I'm very, very grateful for that because they had every reason in the world because being out there drinking for the previous 5 years, I wasn't a productive worker, right? I was probably hitting them about 30% of the time, and I got an important job and you can't perform at that level, but they kept me, so I'm very grateful they kept me. And so thank goodness for Alcoholics Anonymous because I knew a friend in the program that was still in the program that I'd helped out before. His name is Alan, and I gave him a call. I said, Alan, I need to go back to Alcoholics Anonymous. And he said, Craig, be at this meeting. And that's where I met Tim and some others up there in Gaineswood, a meeting at the Hall Club. He said, be at this meeting at 7:30 on Saturday. And by God, that's where I went, and that's what I did. I can remember walking into that meeting after being away for a lot of years and walking through the door, and right above the door it said, welcome home, right? Welcome home. And I knew when I walked in there's people look just like you guys, and people talking, reading the steps, all the stuff up on the walls, and I knew I was exactly where I needed to be, I was back home again, part of. And that's the great thing about Alcoholics Anonymous. We never have to be alone again, right? Never have to be alone again, and we're part of people that know exactly what's wrong with us, right? We speak the same language, and so I knew from when I was in AA before that, we got to stick with the winners, got to get a sponsor, right? So, that's the first thing I did. I got a sponsor, and I went to the Alpharetta Group online. They still have online meetings, and I went to an online meeting, and Troy was hosting the meeting, chairing the meeting that night. And I can remember going into that online meeting, and I go to a lot of online meetings, and I love them all over the world. And it's really helped me in my recovery. Most days I go to 3 or 4 meetings a day because I was told to me early on, Craig, you drink for hours a day. You probably need to spend hours a day in recovery, right? My sponsor, he said, you can't overdose on meetings, right? Can't overdose on meetings. So I go to a bunch of them, and but I can remember coming into that meeting, and Troy said, we've been saving a seat for a guy named Craig, right? He made me feel a part of. He made me feel welcome. And there's certain meetings that do that and certain meetings that don't do that. But he made me feel a part of, and when he spoke, I wanted what he had, right? I wanted what he had. He was speaking the language of the heart. He was speaking solution-based Alcoholics Anonymous, so I asked him to be my sponsor, right? And he does what sponsors do, and he said, Craig, he said, do you have a desire to stop drinking, right? Do you have the desire to stop drinking? And are you willing to go to any length to do it? And I said, yes, right? And I said, Troy, he asked me, he said, Craig, now what step are you on? And I said, Troy, I'm already on step 3. I've been around this program, Alcoholics Anonymous, before, and I'm already on step 3. I was 10 days sober, right? Which that can happen. You can be on step 3 at 10 days for sure, but I wasn't, but I told him I was. And he said, no, you're not, Craig. You're on step 1. I said, oh, all right, Troy, I'm on step 1. I became sponsorable that night, right? And I listened to him. And, if you don't love your sponsor, if your sponsor doesn't know you better than anybody, if your sponsor is not taking you through the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, if your sponsor doesn't have a sponsor, fire your sponsor, right? Get you a sponsor that's doing all that, right? Because first thing he told me, he said, Craig, my job is to get you through the step. He said, I sponsor sponsors, right? That's what he told me. He said, my job is to get you through the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous and to get your hand into the hand of a power greater than yourself. That's what we do, that's what, Troy can't keep me sober, but the power can, right? And so I became sponsorable that night, and I can remember the first thing he told me to do, he said, Craig, I want you to read page 567, 568 of the big book, right? And I love those pages, right? I didn't know at the time why he had me reading it, but I know it today because it's about the spiritual experience. And if you're here tonight and you're thinking, what the heck is a spiritual awakening? What is a spiritual experience? Well, in step 12 up there, it tells us, as a result of these steps, we have the spiritual awakening, right? As a result of. We can't have it until we go through the steps. Maybe we can have parts of it when we're going through the steps. But a spiritual experience, and it tells 567, 568 tells us that it's just a personality change sufficient enough to bring about recovery, right? Personality change sufficient enough to bring about recovery, right? Change, we got to change. We got to change from who we were, because we're walking in darkness, right? There's all darkness, right? And we got to have a personality change sufficient enough to bring about recovery. We got to change from the person we were to a new person. And that's part of it. It talks about transformation, talks about a vast change in feeling and outlook, and he had me read that. Then the next thing he had me do, and then he told me to call him every day, right? And I'm like, well, I got to call this guy every single day. I talked to him today, matter of fact. He's making sure that I'm willing, right? And then he's got to get to know me, right? He can't get to know me if I don't call him, so I have to call him every single day for a couple of years. But the second thing he asked me to do, he said, I want you to learn the set-aside prayer. And I'm like, man, I've been around Alcoholics Anonymous before, and I've never heard the set-aside prayer, right? I'm like, what the heck is the set-aside prayer? So I had to go look it up, right? He didn't tell me where it said. I had to go find it. So I found it, and man, how beautiful is that? That's what we really have to do, right? We have to set aside everything that we think we know. Because I think I know a lot, but look where I ended up at, right? So maybe I don't know so much, so I have to get rid of those old ideas, those old prejudices, and I got to, let go of that stuff. So, set aside everything that I think I know. So what? So I can have an open mind, a new experience, and most importantly, see the truth about you, see the truth about me, and then he says, Craig, I want you to write down your first step. I'm like, man, why can't we just talk about it, right? And that's one of the most important things he's taught me to do. Pen the paper, right? Pen the paper. Something so powerful about pen to paper, right? And it's hard to explain unless you do it, right? But I found out by doing it, and I'd get these thoughts out of my head. Got to get these thoughts that are going on up here, like a mental narrative, the chatter of 1,000 monkeys, stinking thinking, whatever you want to call it, right? We got this stuff going on, but when we're writing things down, the only thing we can think about when we're writing is what we're actually writing. There's nothing else going on because the only thing we can think about is writing. It's different than typing. So he had me write it down. Well, step one. And then I had to read it back to him. And I had to read it back to a couple of the guys he was sponsoring. And he got to know me. He shared some things about himself. And got to get over that fear. I didn't want to tell him that kind of the stuff that we had to talk about in step one. But I also didn't know that he was prepping me for step 4, right? Because, everybody's scared. We're scared to do a step 4 in Alcoholics Anonymous, right? Because we talk about the fear that comes behind, this personal inventory, and all it is making a list, right? Pen to paper, right? You got to make a list. And so he's prepping me for that, and then we had a step 2, step 3, I had a step 2, step 3 experience with him. And, You know, he's always taught me never deny, man, the personal experience with these steps, right? You know, and it comes down to this, you know, we got a common problem, right? We're all here tonight, not because we're, you know, well, we've got a common problem. We're here tonight because we're alcoholics, right? You know, we can't have just one drink. We can't just have two. We have a common problem. The cool part is there's a common solution, and it's right here in this book, right? Precisely how we've recovered. It's right in there. It's the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous right up there on the wall. But we all have to have our own personal experience with the program, right? I can sit here and tell you about mine all night long, right? Makes sense to me. But until you have your own, and if you've had one with each of these steps, you know what I'm talking about, right? If you haven't, you know, you don't know. But you can know, right? That's the cool part about it. So step 2 and step 3, I can still remember it. You know, we did it at the Alpharetta Clubhouse, and you know, we went to this room, and you know, we're going through and reading step 2 and step 3 pages in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and we get to the step 3 prayer, and Troy now he throws his book down on the ground, man. He gets down on his knees, and I'm like, I followed him, right? That's what we do. We don't know, so we follow. And we got down and we said the step 3 prayer together. And I can still remember he had his hand up on my shoulder, right? We became part of, and you know, that experience of going through that the prayer with him. It's very liberating, right? It's very freeing. And what does it really do? What does the step 3 do? Gets us ready for step 4. That's what it does, right? And what does it tell us after step 3? It basically says, don't waste any time, right? Do not stop. The key to all these steps, in my opinion, is we don't stall out, right? You know, I think one of the biggest laws we say in AA is, you know, what are you working on? What step are you working on? Well, I'm working on my step 4. Well, how long does it really take to do a step 4, right? You know, I think it can be done very quickly, right? You know, but, you know, just writing the list down. And what's the point of writing a list down of our fears? What's the point of writing down, a list of our, resentments? What's the purpose of writing down, our sex inventory? Nobody wants to talk about that, right? Nobody wants to talk about the sex inventory, but we have to, right? Because if we don't, guess what? It'll get us drunk again, right? Because we think we're different. And so I do the step 4, and I write all this stuff down, and it's pages, and but there's one thing I didn't want to tell them about, right? And it talks about it in the book, and thank God for good sponsorship, because I remember, when I got there to do the step 5 with him at the Alpharetta Clubhouse, first thing he asked me, is there anything you don't want to tell me about before we start? Now, I was going to wait till the very end, and if I was feeling good, I was going to tell him about this one thing. But guess what I did? Told him. And guess what he did? He told me about some things he's done. And guess what? There's only so many things we can do in alcoholics, being drunk, right? But boy, in my head, it was nobody else has ever done that. It's never happened to anybody else. And it really wasn't a big deal after I got it out of me, right? And told him about it. And it's very... we have to do that to be set free, right? And I was set free when I told him that, and the rest of it just came out, right? It was no big deal, and so we finished with that step 5, and he told me to do exactly what it says in the book, go home and sit, steps 6 and 7. I can't do it with you. I can't do it with my sponsor. It's between me and my higher power, right? And it's not like you do it once and you're done. It's a continual process, step 6 and step 7. But I want to get to steps 8 and 9, because I want to talk about my daughters. I have 2 beautiful daughters, Kinsley and Karis. They're 12 and 15 years old. And, I'm divorced, so they would come over to my house every other weekend, and I always promised when they were there, I wouldn't drink. I wouldn't drink that much, but towards the end, I started drinking a lot, and, it started affecting how I treated them. It started affecting, main thing it affected was I wasn't present when they were there, right? I wasn't a part of their life when they were there, and so I knew I had to make amends to them. That's the other thing on step 4, what step 4 does. It gives us a list of who we need to make amends to, right? That's what comes out. It's one of the things that comes out of doing that step. And so I knew I had to make amends to these two beautiful girls, and I talked to my sponsor about it. That's the other thing I've learned in this program, Alcoholics Anonymous. I may think I know how to make an amends. I may think I know what I need to say, but Troy has taught me, we need to discuss it, right? And so we discussed it, and we came to an agreement, and I was going to make amends to him, and so I did. My youngest daughter first. Her name's Karis, and she used to tell me when I can remember going down those steps to their room, and she would ask me a couple of times. She would say, "Daddy, do you remember last night?" Right? Do you remember last night? And those are words that a dad never wants to hear from his daughter. Is, do you remember last night? Right? And I'm sitting there thinking, I think I do. I think I remember most of it. Can you tell me a little bit more about it so I can really remember? You don't know what I didn't know what I'd done, right? And so I had to make amends to this girl, and I got drunk on one of her birthday parties, and it really affected, her and at her birthday party, and embarrassed her, right? And so I had to make amends to her. You never know. At this time, she was 8 years old, and you never know what an 8-year-old little girl is going to want when you go to make amends for, your actions. And she said, "You've already done it." I said, "Hold on, I've already done it." She said, "Yeah, you've already done it." And I said, What do you mean I've already done it?" She said, "You stopped drinking, right? You stopped drinking." And this is the only thing that little girl wanted her dad to do, was to not drink, right? How beautiful is that, right? That this little girl, the only thing that she wants is her dad not to drink whenever, or especially not in her presence, not to ruin her birthdays anymore. And my other daughter was a little bit older. She was 12 at the time. And I asked her, went through the amends with her, and, what can I do to right this wrong? And here's what she told me. Keep on going to meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, right? That's what I do, I've been to a few today. She knows I'm at one tonight, and probably listen to another one going home tonight, And, man, how beautiful is that? And it's all a gift of this program, right? This is stuff that I can't do. And I definitely couldn't do it without good sponsorship, right? And so I want to, got just a few more minutes, 5 minutes. So I want to talk about, one of the things I've learned in this program is, one of the most important steps is step 11. Step 11. Seek and improve my conscious contact with God, right? Now, how do you get to know God, right? How do you get to know God? It's taught to me early on, the only way I can get to know God is through prayer and meditation. Now, how do you also really get to know God? I got to spend time with God. I call it God. You may call it higher power. You may call it, the great reality. You can call it whatever it is, as long as it's not yourself, and as long as it makes sense to you, right? And but I found out that Troy told me. He said, if you look, I learn how to pray, right? And you can't mess. Oh, you know how you mess up prayer? It's by not doing prayer. And he told me to start out was asking God to give me strength and courage in the morning to stay sober for that day, and then at night just to say thank you, right? And that's what I started out doing. But one of the things that's really helped me a lot is I was at 6 months sober, and I was looking for ways to seek and improve that conscious contact, And I was in a meeting over in Alabama, and this lady was talking about two-way prayer. And it's two-way prayer. It came out of the Oxford group, and it's basically what it is, to make it simple. It's a way of, I do it early in the morning. I get up at 4 o'clock, 4:30, 5 o'clock every day, And it started out 10 or 15 minutes, and now it's an hour or so. But I read and I write. I read and I write. And it's amazing what comes to me early in the morning while it's still dark out, before I pick up the phone, before I turn on the whatever, and my mind is clear, I have a cup of coffee, and I read spiritual literature. Some of it's AA approved, a lot of it's not. The book actually encourages us not, to seek out other literature. There's, before they had the big book, they sought out other literature for sure. And, but what two-way prayer is basically is writing my prayer down. Okay? Pen to paper again. Something very, very powerful about writing my prayer down. And then the cool part is writing down how the God of my understanding answers that prayer for me. All right? Sounds kind of wonky, right? Sounds kind of weird. But you gotta, like everything else, you gotta have your own personal experience with it and see what it does for you, or maybe doesn't do for you. But it's really helped me a lot in my prayer and meditation life, because you might be thinking, what the heck is meditation? Meditation, contemplation, whatever you want to call it, is just sitting still, relaxing, unhurried time, right? How many times can we sit and not have unhurried time, right? It's amazing how the brain works when it's not hurried, right? And it really helps to do it early in the morning for me. And so that's really helped me a lot in my walk, and that's the way I get to know God. I got to spend more time with Him. And I found out by doing that I get this daily reprieve. And if I ever think I've gotten the power again, that's where I better watch out. I know today I'm just as powerless over alcohol today as I was 3 years ago, as I was 20 years ago, right? Powerless over alcohol. If I put it in my body, I'm done, right? So I look at it this way. Every single day I have to renew the surrender. I have to renew it every single day. If I renew it every single day, I've got a pretty good chance of staying sober today, And I do what you guys have taught me to do. Go to meetings, call my sponsor, read the book, speak, be of service, sponsor. Man, my sponsees call me, I don't want to answer the phone, right? Don't want to pick that phone up. But boy, I found out when I do, that's where the miracle happens, right? That's where the miracle happens. Why I don't want to pick it up? Because I'm selfish and self-centered. So every single day I'm fighting against that, right? And the quicker I can come out of that selfish, self-centered life, that's where joy happens. That's where happiness comes. That's where serenity comes, right? So I love Alcoholics Anonymous. This program has saved my life. My daughters love Alcoholics Anonymous. They know all about you guys. I've taught them all about the program and how it works. They've been to meetings. They know I'm sharing here tonight. They know about gratitude lists. They know about two-way prayer. They know about resentments. They know about, why not teach them this stuff, right? If it can save my life, maybe it can help them in some way, right? I know it can. And they love it. And, AA is definitely doing for me today what I could not do for myself. And I know today, like I said, I'm just as powerless today over alcohol as I was yesterday, 3 years ago. If I ever think I've got that power again, if I ever think I don't need to go to the meeting tonight, if I ever think, you know what, I've been to 5 this week already, I don't need to go to the 6th one. The 6th one's one I better be going to, right? Because if I pick up the first drink, might not make it back. And I wanna stay sober one day at a time for the rest of my life, but I got to do it one day at a time, right? Glad to be sober tonight. Glad to be with you guys tonight. Thank you for allowing me to share with you guys.
Thank you so much, Craig. The distinction between losing and giving was really, really important for me, so I appreciated you bringing that up. Thank you. All right, we've asked Bob to come do the chips.
Everybody on Bob and Alcoholic.
Bob!
Hey, Bob, what are your wonderful chipmunks tonight? Okay, we have a white chip here. Someone just coming in one day at a time, wants to start an incredible, fantastic journey in life.
First I slept and then I crept to a hope-filled dream. You rescued me and finally waking there I see. I look into love's window for a soul that's meant for me. Takes me where the promises are real. Sometimes quickly, sometimes slow, we get just what we need. On a broad highway, stride for stride, we walk eternally. I look into love's window for a heart that beats for me. Takes me where the promises are real. And I always long for something that sets me free. And I'd run to a world in harmony. See love as a vision that one day would appear to me. Take me where the promises are real. Take me where the promises